Valerie Bradford, how are you?
I'm good, Greg. Thank you so much for inviting me here today.
Current Member of Parliament for Kitchener South Hespeler, running again. Yes. Why? Nobody knows.
Do you want me to answer that now?
Sure.
I'm running again because I've had the opportunity and privilege to serve the residents of Kitchener South Hespeler before, and it's nothing I take for granted or lightly. And I would like the opportunity to continue. I think there's still lots of work to do.
Sure.
Obviously, we're in a bit of an economic turmoil and crisis right now, generated by our formerly friendly neighbor to the south. Mm-hmm. My personal background here in the community, dealing with the economy and economic development for 15 years before I ran for office, I think qualifies me to handle that locally. Mm-hmm. I'm connected with the business community that I worked with prior to running for office, particularly the manufacturing community. Mm-hmm. And so I want to continue that work and be the strong voice for our residents here in Ottawa and serve them locally.
That's great. I need to explain to you and to those watching why I look like this, because I look like a scruffy guy, but fact of the matter is I had neck surgery a couple of weeks ago, and it's still healing, but I still can't shave. So I didn't want to leave a patch of hair. I thought I'd just let it all go, but it's driving me crazy. I can't wait to the time when I can shave again. But I had a little procedure also in December. So what I want to say is my experience was absolutely incredible. The doctors were wonderful to me. The nurses were fantastic. The system as it stands was brilliant from my perspective, but it was really the people that made it great.
Exactly.
But we all remember back in the pandemic when there were lots of complaints about our system. We found that there were holes in our system. We weren't ready for that pandemic, but we learned a lot through that. Mm-hmm. That we all promised ourselves. Mm-hmm. Whether it's those of us out here in society trying to push for change or help, but those who were in government as well realized and said, yeah, we need to make sure we address these things and we attack these things and we solve some of those issues, at least the issues we can solve. However, we're now out of the pandemic. Nobody remembers to wear a mask anymore. Nobody cares about wearing a mask. Hand sanitizers are almost hard to find now in places when before it was in your car.
Right.
Are we going to forget about that and not address those issues? Because this election doesn't seem to be about policy at all.
Well, first of all, I'm sorry you had firsthand experience with our healthcare system, but I'm happy it was good and you clearly seem to be making a remarkable recovery. And I think when people complain about our healthcare system, it's never about our healthcare workers and the delivery people. The nurses, the doctors, the PSWs, they all stood up during COVID and continue to, and do remarkable things every day. Yes. And so I think we shouldn't lose sight of that. Can I just ask, was it Cambridge Hospital that you were?
Yep.
So again, it's with the new addition and modernization, it's an amazing place that we can be very, very proud of. So I'm glad it was a good experience. I think the shocking, troubling things that stand out in my mind were the long-term care homes. I think those were so shocking. Yes. And I'm afraid that we may have forgotten those issues. But I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that COVID-19 was a teachable moment that lasted about 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. It shone the light on inadequacies that were always there, but we didn't realize. Mm-hmm. So there was good that came out of that. And I think there's still more work to be done in the healthcare system, especially as we have an aging population. I refer to myself, you get to the age of high maintenance. You can still do everything, but it takes a little more maintenance to keep all those things functioning the same way. So, yes, I'm glad your experience was good. And I so appreciate our healthcare workers and all that they do every day. And we're so fortunate that Cambridge Hospital is the way it is. And I know at the other end of the region, in about 10 years, we're going to get a bright, shiny new hospital up there too. But even in older, outdated facilities, they do amazing work.
Yeah, and again, it's just the people. The people are the most amazing people. Actually, for one of the surgeries, I was awake. I didn't want to go under because I kind of fight that. always a little leery of that. One, I had to go under, but, and so I talked him into just giving me a local anesthetic so
Right.
I could be awake. And I had a conversation all the way through with the nurses and the doctors. And it was a ton of fun. I actually had fun.
I know you just wanted to keep an eye on them.
Yeah.
Make sure. It was a trust thing, wasn't
Yeah.
it?
Well, yeah, and I think the surgeon actually said to me, I've never done the surgery with a person's awake. You know you can't move. And I said, well, no, I know I can't move, but if you don't hurt me, then I likely won't move. So so there was an
That was
understanding
good.
going
Right.
through the process. But and anyway, I think it's really important that, especially through this election, I wanted to make sure I highlighted that with the candidates coming through to say, let's not forget about what we learned, and let's make
Absolutely.
sure we keep those things at the forefront. We can't address all of them. We're never
No.
going to have a system where there aren't cracks.
Right.
We just can't fix them.
Right.
But certainly we can remember the mistakes and the ones that we can, and we need to keep focused on that.
Absolutely.
But this is really your bailiwick now we're getting into with the tariff wars and trade and manufacturers hunting for, source suppliers that are, maybe somewhere else other than a country that's, putting tariffs on and all of that
Right.
kind of stuff. Do you think we're on the right path and really where are the things that we need to concentrate on to make sure that our economy is strong and vibrant in the future?
Well, Greg, I think this is something like COVID. It's an opportunity. It's a crisis of opportunity. And it's going to be rough for a while. We don't know how long because nobody knows how long President Trump's going to do the things that are unexpected. He's disrupted the whole world. You and I know that uncertainty is the most difficult thing to deal with. Whether it's a medical procedure or diagnosis, or whether it's the economy or businesses planning or households planning, you can deal with bad news better than you can deal with uncertainty because you just don't know how to plan for that.
Yeah.
We don't know what other bad things are coming and for how long they'll last. So it's really upended the whole world's economy right now, which is very unfortunate. We were progressing nicely. We had inflation down to what we wanted. Our interest rates, we had nice low interest rates, and everything was starting to come back from COVID. And now here we are with a setback. But I feel Canada's uniquely positioned to survive this. I feel that our current leader, Mark Carney, is uniquely qualified to do with economic crisis. That's his specialty, after all. He is an economist. He's not a politician, which means when you ask him a question, you get a nice short answer that's answering the question asked. Imagine,
Imagine.
Clearly not a politician.
Yeah.
So in any case, Canada has more trade deals with other countries than any other G7 country. We've built those over time. Now, unfortunately, we haven't utilized them like we could have or should have because it's natural to go with the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Our big neighbor is next door and speaks the same language. You don't have transportation issues. It was easy. When I was working in economic development, there was these exporters to border states program, and we would take companies over to New York or Pennsylvania or whatever and set them up with partnerships. That's easier to do than on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
But I did notice that once Mark Carney became prime minister, those 9 days, boy, was he effective. He calls himself a pragmatist, and he is. He just gets things done. So he just ignored what was going on in the States. He said, once you respect our sovereignty and you want to talk about our relationship and trade, we'll talk. Until then, off he goes to Europe. Now, he went right over to France and Great Britain because he's well known internationally. Not only well known, well respected. It takes a new political leader years to accomplish the credibility that he already has because he was the Bank of England governor during Brexit. And I would argue Brexit, although that was a self-inflicted wound, was chaotic for Britain's economy as what we're dealing with now. Ours is being imposed on us. But all this uncertainty, we don't know what the ramifications are. We can suspect they're not going to be great, but we have to shift away from that former best friend relationship, which clearly is no longer our best friend, and he's got another, almost like 3 3/4 years. It seems he's been in power a lot longer than 90 days or whatever it is. But anyway, we have to move away from that. So I know Mark Carney has a plan, and he's already been able to bring the premiers together and get us all working together. Canada, after COVID, had become quite divided. That whole situation was very divisive for people. And teams don't win if they're not pulling in the same direction. Our Canadian team has to pull together. And it's so heartening to see how Canadians are rallying together, prepared to take some pain, short-term pain, for long-term gain. And that's where we're at. So by July the 1st, he's got all the premiers to agree to get rid of these insane interprovincial trade barriers. You and I were fighting this for years.
Oh, God.
I know. And the lack of movement of our skilled tradespeople. If you can wire a house in Ontario, pretty sure you could do it in Alberta or BC. Just silly things. So those false trade barriers, they were real. It was costing our economy $20 billion a year. So now that we're rid of those, that is going to help. We'll have that $20 billion to bring into our economy. That'll help minimize the damage that is going to be inflicted on us from the States. When I first got elected as an MP, that was one of the most disappointing things for me, really the only disappointing, was how Canada didn't act like a country. We had all these squabbling children, 10 provinces, 3 territories, everyone wanted the biggest share of the pie, just like families, right? But the Canadian family needs to unite, and we have. And so I'm hopeful about the prospects that brings.
Are we going to get those pipelines built, and are we going to get our resources to Tidewater, which is something, as you know, the Chambers have been calling for a long, long time?
I think there's a good opportunity. The leader of Quebec has already said now that he'll consider it. I've always felt like, why do we import oil or whatever for the East when we produce? We've got all this gas and everything that we could and should be shipping across and making ourselves self-sufficient. And Mark Carney has called out that we can be leaders in the world. So yes, transferring to sustainable energy, but in the meantime, making use of the resources that we have, making them available to Canadians at Canadian prices. Right now, we're subsidizing the States. They buy our oil at a discount, refine it, and sell it at a profit. And yet somehow President Trump thinks that, he's subsidizing us. Yes, no.
I think the actual truth is if you actually take the benefit of them selling our refined oil to the world, we actually have a trade deficit to about $50 billion. So.
Exactly. If you take the whole energy component out, yes, we are in a trade deficit with them, as opposed to he thinks it's the other way around. But it serves its purposes for the argument. I mean, there really is no argument for these unfair tariffs because we have a free trade deal. We shouldn't be even talking tariffs, but that's the hand we're dealt, so that's the hand we have to play.
I think we all became complacent because it's so easy, and maybe that's the advantage they're taking, saying, "Oh, you thought we were your best friends and reliable trading partners, and now we're going to put the squeeze on because we know it's going to be more difficult for you to look around the world." Problem is, he's doing it to everybody, and the rest of the world are looking and saying, "Gee, maybe we should all band together because
I think we
don't
should.
have a friend."
I feel that Canada has been the canary in the coal mine. He picked on us first, and I'm so proud that we stood up strong. That's one thing the president respects is strength and power. He doesn't respect weakness. If you capitulate, he'll be after more and more and more, and we can't do that. So we have to just power through this as we will as Canadians. I think he's underestimated us. Yes, we're calm and polite till roused. And we're roused now.
I think that's typical. I don't want to get into it necessarily, but the arrogance of the American machine has always been there, that they're here for our benefit.
Right.
When the reality of it is they wouldn't be where they are if it wasn't for the rest of us.
Well, when he's making the claim that we're irrelevant, we don't deserve to be a country, we're the 51st state, you've got nothing we want or need, I think if that were the case, he wouldn't be so keen on overtaking our country by
Right.
economic means if we truly had nothing he wants, like water and critical minerals and, oil resources and everything. Yes.
Yeah, well, because the bad thing for him would be we'd have, I think, 57 Congress
Yes.
persons. We'd have probably about 8 senators. And the likelihood of them being Republican is maybe a
Not
lot
great.
slimmer. So,
Right. Be careful what you wish for.
Be careful what you wish for. Speaking of what you wish for, what I wish for is, Canada. Canada is probably known as, we're the world's friend. When you've traveled, and when you travel and you have your Canadian pin on, or people find out you're Canadian, they're happy to meet you, right?
Exactly.
They're welcoming. Because they know we're a friendly people.
Right.
And we accept others, right? That's more really, I think, what the world looks at us as. As we move forward with this problem south of the border, foreign leadership's going to be really critically important.
Yes, it is.
Developing friendships, developing relationships,
Right.
developing trade corridors. All of those things are going to take foreign leadership that is respected, but also can have the ability to create those relationships. How do you feel about it right now, from your party's perspective, but maybe on a national perspective as well?
Well, I feel under Mark Carney, we're in a good position because, as I mentioned before, he already has the credence internationally. He's not only well known, he's well respected. Like, he was able to go right off on a day's notice off to Europe, get those meetings with President Macron and the Prime Minister of England, and sit down and have good conversations. The same with the European Union. He doesn't have to introduce himself. They know well who he is. They respect him. He respects them. We're a very multicultural country, as you've alluded to, so we have relationships with countries all over the world, respective relationships. We need to build on those. We've been jilted, there's no question. We've been jilted by our former best friend, who apparently is besties with our neighbor to the north, and we're kind of the meat in the sandwich, which doesn't feel terrific. Hence, we're going to focus a lot more on Arctic sovereignty and security. We're going to invest a lot in our military, particularly up in the north. As the polar ice cap melts, and we need, we're more vulnerable, and we need to recognize that. But I think, at the end, we are going to be stronger and more diversified with our trading relationships and resourceful, and we'll come out better and stronger out of this. Stronger together. Canada's strong. That's our focus, and all singing on the same page.
Yeah, very good. How about Kitchener South Hespeler, Valerie?
Yes.
You've represented them now for
3.5
years.
Right.
And you must have some priorities within the riding as well. And why don't you talk a little bit about those, and then tell those constituents why they should vote for you?
Well, first of all, our area has been identified as number 4th in vulnerability for the tariffs. So we have a lot of people that could be directly impacted. Like, we have a lot of workers at our 2 Toyota plants here. One's a Lexus plant. Now, we're so fortunate that it's Toyota that's here, the largest automotive manufacturer in the world, and there's a reason for that. And they are very, very well run. And so far, it's steady as she goes. They're not talking any layoffs. Their products are in big demand. There's waiting lists for them. So we're so blessed to have them. But big warm hug for all those people, because I'm sure there's a lot of uncertainty, thinking, well, it's good for now. Who knows? They couldn't help but feeling that way.
Yeah.
And they give so much back to our community, their workforce as well as the company corporately. They sponsor so many things. So I'm so proud that they're in our riding, and we've got people on both sides of the riding that work with Toyota. So that's one thing. One of the things I ran on before, I was passionate about as a surviving single parent that weathered that storm, was affordable childcare. When governments invest, not spend, on childcare, for every dollar they invest, the economy is boosted by $2.50. There aren't many more investments that governments make in economies that they get that payback, because you free up about 50% of the population to be able to afford to go to work. And if you can't afford childcare, it could be $16,000 a year, price of a mortgage. You're not going to pay your rent, and you're not going to buy a house on one income.
Right.
So that was important. Now, Ontario was one of the last ones to sign on. So we did achieve 50%. The commitment is that we will get to the $10 a day, which many provinces have already, by the end of this year. So I'll be watching carefully for that, because that's critical. The federal government put more money in to develop more spaces, because there's still a shortage of spaces. You know, it's great to have it, but if there's no space for your child, we joke that as soon as you're even thinking of conception, you better put your name on the list.
Exactly.
Because Kitchener was called a daycare desert, which you don't want to be that. And we need to pay those workers more, too. Their work, just like in long-term care homes, PSWs, those are very, very valuable, underpaid, underappreciated jobs. We need to compensate people for the work they're doing with our most vulnerable.
Yeah.
So there's that. Another thing that I am big on is tax reform, because I think single taxpayers have always been discriminated against, because they don't have any benefit of income splitting or any of those things. If you're not part of a couple, that doesn't apply to you. And most people, at some point or another, are single for part of their life, some of us longer than others. So, you know, everybody's going to be single. You start out single, you probably end single. You might even have patches of singlehood in the meantime. And, you know, you're treated unfairly. Even worse, in my opinion, are the seniors and the tax situation. Heaven help you if you're a single senior, which many people are. But right now, I want us to revisit retirement income funds. The way it works right now is you can contribute to your RSP, you have to RIF it by age 71, and then by age 72, you have to start pulling out money from your retirement income, whether or not you're retired. People are living longer now, and they work past 65, sometimes for affordability issues, sometimes because they're still passionate, they have things to offer, we need them in the workforce, and so they're earning income, so they're taxed on that, and yet we force them to withdraw from the retirement income fund when they're not retired and pay tax on that too, and then by the time they actually retire, they've depleted their retirement income fund because they had to pull it out when they weren't retired.
And now they can't work.
Right. And so I just think that doesn't make any sense. So I think that needs to be revisited. Now, Mark Carney's already said, because of this tariff situation, that we're going to decrease for a year the amount, the percentage that you have to pull out. Because right now, if you're having to cash in some securities, you're selling at a loss.
Yes, exactly.
So not a good time.
No.
So people, I'm putting my CFP hat on now. I used to be a certified financial planner. If you don't need the money, like, first of all, don't look at your portfolio. It's going to upset you and raise your blood pressure. And right now it's a paper loss, you know, but if you trigger it and sell it, you're selling at a loss. People are questioning, a lot of people made some money in the markets when he kind of reversed that the other day. He kind of telepath, good time to buy, and then bingo. But anyway, we won't go there, but just stay calm and carry on, as Her Majesty used to say.
Just stay calm and
carry on. Yes.
That's a good one.
Words to live by.
Yes, for sure. Valerie, it's been wonderful sitting down and having a conversation with you. It's been far too long. I think we mentioned it might have been near COVID when we were conversing before or shortly thereafter.
Right.
But it was fun. And,
it was fun, Greg.
You know, we need to have more conversations like this.
Absolutely.
All the best through the next 2 weeks, actually.
2 weeks today.
2 weeks today.
That's right.
For the election. So those in Kitchener South, Hespeler, remember Valerie Bradford.
Thank you. Thanks, Greg. Always a pleasure. Stay in touch.
You too.